everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be taking a look at the Grumbacher Academy watercolors, courtesy of the homegrown artist here on YouTube. That's Barbara. She sent me over a little palette of these paints to try out. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to her channel in the description below. So first and foremost, thank you so much, Barbara. The second thing is that I'm having a huge 12 Days of Christmas giveaway. Now I'm basing this off of my Instagram platform rather than on YouTube, since I post there daily instead of here on YouTube where I only post a couple times a week. So if you want more information, go ahead and head on over to Instagram. Find me at InLiquidColor if you're not already doing so. Make sure that you're following me so that you can keep up on the daily prizes that I'll be giving out between now and Christmas Eve. You can enter every day between now and Christmas Eve, and on Christmas Eve I'm going to have the grand prize giveaway for that. So again, head on over to Instagram, make sure you're following me there, and also make sure that you check back because Instagram's algorithm is not the best, and sometimes I see things from my friends' posts 5 days late and they've already moved past whatever they were talking about, so be sure to check that daily. My third and final note for today that doesn't apply to everyone, but I did want to go ahead and throw this out there, is that if you are a content creator either here on YouTube or over on Instagram, or maybe you have your own blog, and if you are not already part of the Amazon Influencer Program and would like to be, I'm going to head and putting a referral link in the description below. The Amazon Influencer Program is an extension of Amazon Associates in which you can set up your own storefront. So for instance, my storefront is amazon.com/shop/InLiquidColor, and I can put all of my recommendations for my supplies in that area for people to find whenever they would like to, and that makes it really easy for all my viewers to find the supplies that I'm recommending in my videos. So if you'd like to be part of that, you can use the link in the description between now and the end of the year and get yourself set up on there. If you're watching this in the future in 2018 or however long, and that referral link doesn't work for you, you can still check out the Amazon Influencer Program, and I would encourage you to go ahead and set that up for yourself. So let's go ahead and get back to our Grumbacher Academy review. I'm so sorry for all the housekeeping, but thanks for sticking with me. We are going to be taking a look at the student grade line of paints today. And one of the ways that you can tell student grade and artist grade apart if you're just in the store looking at different things online is that artist grade paints are going to be priced per the series. So some pigments are more expensive than others to produce, and so a professional line of paint is going to be priced on those pigments. Because student grade paints use more fillers in their paints and other types of things in their paints aside from just the pigment, they typically can price them all the same no matter what the color is. So at the time of recording this video on Blick, I think they're actually having a sale because they're only $2.39 per 7 milliliter tube, and in my local store I was able to pick them up for $4 a piece, or that's the price that they are in the store. As I mentioned, Barbara over at the Homegrown Artist sent me this palette with some colors that she bought to try herself. So before we jump into looking at the swatches compared to other brands of paints, I did want to explain to you why I haven't used this brand of paint before. They're in my local store. I've definitely seen them. I think I even get them at like Michael's. I'm not really sure on that, but my local art store has them. You can find them online. They're really commonly available here in the US at least, and the reason I haven't purchased them before, I didn't even start with them, is because when you look at them, they look really, really basic, and they look like student grade paints, and there's nothing fancy schmancy about it, so I kind of glazed over them and went straight past them and onto some of the other options that were out there. The great thing about these is that they are 7.5 milliliter tubes, and so you get a fair amount of paint for what you're purchasing. Like I mentioned, they're only $2.39 over on Blick right now. They do have their information, so it's from Chart Pack Ink, and then we've got all of our pigment information on the back. You can see that they list the pigments, that it's a gum Arabic vehicle, which we all know watercolors are. So this is what you would be getting if you were looking for them in the store. Like I mentioned, Barbara from the Homegrown Artist sent me over a set of 12 to try out. This is actually part of a Christmas gift that I got after using the paints that Barbara sent, so thank you for that. And today we're going to be taking a look at this 12 color selection that she picked out, and I think it's a really good selection of paints. There are definitely some great things about these paints. There's some things that I don't love about these paints, and today we're going to go ahead and look at that. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is take a look at our swatches, and my swatch binder has gotten completely out of control. I've taken out about half of the pages that are pertinent to the colors that I have here. The other half are sitting on the floor in the binder because I just don't have room for them all. And even this is another thing I'd love your feedback on, is that if I compare them to all the swatches that I have, you're gonna get them in these sleeves because I can't take them all out. That would take a ridiculous amount of time. So there is some glare here, and I know that can be a little bit problematic when you're looking at them on camera. So I can either do this where I'm comparing it to all of them, or I can pull out a couple of each color and do a comparison side by side. So let me know in the comments below which you prefer for our comparisons here, because I want this information to be helpful for you. There's no point in me recording it if it's not. So do you want them in the sleeves where there's a bit of glare but you have more options, or do you just want to see a couple side by side out on the table? So first up we have Lemon Yellow, which is PY3, and the hue is comparable to pretty much all the other shades of Lemon Yellow that I have. It's on the cooler side, so it's cooler than like the Mission Gold, but it definitely falls in line with some of the other options that are more typical of a cool yellow. The one thing about this one, and we're going to see this across a lot of these swatches, and I'm actually going to talk about it after we're done looking at these, is that a lot of these paints have a fair amount of opacity to them. So that line that you see there is pretty covered up, whereas if we look at the Sennelier, you can still see most of that black line intact, and this was not uncommon across the entire line of paints. Next up we've got Indian Yellow, which is PY65. So here I have one other Indian Yellow, I guess, to show you here from my Mary Blue. It's definitely more yellow than that, but PY65 is the same as Hansa Yellow Deep, so I can compare them here for you. It's actually pretty comparable to the other brands. It's a little bit more on the yellow side than Daniel Smith's version is, but definitely falls in line with Da Vinci's Aralide Yellow Deep. Next up we have Scarlet Lake, which is actually really interesting. It's made from PO36 and PR107. I told myself I was going to look this up before the video, and I forgot to, so these aren't pigments that I'm terribly familiar with. I know PR108 is cadmium scarlet, but I don't know what PR107 is. Like always, I will put a note down on the video somewhere over here after I've looked it up during post-processing, but it's a really nice fire truck, middle of the road red. It's definitely more red than any of the oranger tones that I have here, and we start to get a little bit closer when we're looking at Naphtha Red, which is PR112 is pretty comparable. This one is a slightly lighter, brighter version, whereas this is a little bit heavier. If we move on to the PR254s, it's really much falls in line with those middle of the road reds. It is a dual pigment, so I know a lot of people don't like that, but I actually like the hue of this quite a bit, and when you glaze it, you can get a really strong tinting strength here. You can see how much it deepened with just the second glaze. Sorry guys, I had to take a bit of a break. The lights were absolutely killing my eyes and I couldn't handle the glare that was coming off of the paper, so I rearranged everything. Let me know in the comments below if this is still okay, so that we can try and get through these swatches all right. Anyway, we've got Phthalo Crimson up next, which is PV19, so that's just the same as a Rose Red or Permanent Rose or Quinacridone Rose, and it's definitely a pinker version of this pigment, so it's not like the redder tones up here. It's really close to the Mission Gold Permanent Rose or the My Mary Blue. My Mary Blue is a little bit more on the redder side, I guess. But if we move up to something like Daniel Smith's Quinacridone Rose, the Grumbacher is definitely warmer than that. Somewhere around Turner's, it looks pretty similar to Turner. Next up we have a really interesting color. This is called Theo Violet, and it is a beautiful warm violet color made from PV19 and PV29, which is Perylene Violet, and it's a really pretty color, but it has an odd texture to it. I actually did this swatch 3 times, trying to make sure that I wasn't doing anything weird with the water or anything like that. So it has a bit of a streakiness to it, but the color itself is super, super beautiful. So you can see here that it's definitely cooler than some of our cool PV19s as we move through the magentas and come, let's see, the Crimson Lake that we have here even is still a lot more warm than this one is. So if we flip through to the warmest violets that I have, we've got Passionate Purple here from American Journey. This one is much darker and more vibrant. It's more red than the Daniel Smith Ultramarine. And if you haven't seen Paraline Violet yet, this is PV29 on its own, so you can definitely see the influence of this color. And if we add that to the PV19, you can kind of see where they came up with this color. Like I said, it's a really pretty color. I used it in the sample painting that I'll show you in a little bit, but it does have a strange textural property to it. Also about that color is that it was really, really heavily cracked when I received it in the mail. The pieces were all over the place, and Barbara even mentioned that it was the worst. It's kind of melded back together here. You can see, because I was painting with it earlier today, that all the pans have kind of remelded back together. When I first got it, I put it together like a puzzle and kind of glued it to the bottom of the tray with the glycerin that I have here. So that's how I got it to stay put until I was ready to paint with it, and then once I started painting it kind of recongealed back together. So there's that. Next up we have Ultramarine, which we just did our first video in the top 5 series that I started. So if you haven't seen that, I'll put a link to it up in the corner there. And Ultramarine was one of my favorite colors. I'll let you watch the video so I don't spoil you into which position on the list it is if you haven't already seen it. But this Ultramarine has an opacity issue once again. So I'm going to show you this up close. Make sure it focuses, and I want you to see if you can see how hard that black line is to see. I know it's a little bit difficult on camera, but let me pull out grams, which is the same kind of deep value, but you can see how much more transparent grams is. Now, Ultramarine is not a color that I have ever found to be opaque, so I don't think it's the pigment itself. Again, we're going to talk about that after we go through the swatches about the opacity of these paints, but it's a really granulating color. The hue is nice. It's a really deep color. You can get really dark tones with it, but it does have that opacity issue. On the other side of things, I really like the Prussian blue. It's really, really deep and it glazes beautifully. I think it holds up to just about any of the other professional brands that I have, including like the Rembrandt and the Holbein here. Da Vinci's even. Da Vinci's is a little bit deeper in its mass tone. My favorite is still always going to be the gram. It's just so deep and vibrant. But it is even better, I think, than some of the other brands, like Mission Gold's is a little bit lighter than the Grumbacher's version. Schmingo's is definitely a weaker color. So it's definitely holds its own along those other paints. Next up we have what they call turquoise. It's PB15:4, which I have actually not seen before, but it's a version of phthalo blue. We've got PB15:3 and PB15:6. So it's just another version of phthalo blue, but this one also has what must be the tiniest amount of phthalo green in it as well, because it's still very much a phthalo blue type of color here. The phthalo green added to it should make it more of a turquoisey color. I can show you here. We've got Graham's version and Mission Gold's version, which is phthalo blue and phthalo green combined, but this one is still very much in the phthalo blue category. Once again, it's a really nice color, really nice and deep. You can get really deep mass tones with it. There's a little bit of that opacity issue, but nothing like the Ultramarine. So the next color I was actually really excited to see in this palette, because typically when you see the color Viridian or Viridian Hue in a student line of paint, you're going to be getting phthalo green blue shade, which is PG7, which is in this color, but you can definitely see that there is an influence and a representation here of PG18, which is actually true Viridian. Viridian is a more subtle version of phthalo green. It granulates, it lifts easier, and it doesn't get as dark in the mass tone. So they've combined them both here in this paint to have a really nice mixture between the two. So I'm going to go ahead and show you both of those pigments here on this page. Hopefully you can see those. So PG7, again, that's phthalo green. That's what you typically get when you get a Viridian hue in a student grade line of paint. And here's the true Viridian at the bottom, where you can see it's much lighter in its tone. M. Grams does a good job of getting a little bit darker, but I definitely like this color. It's still a little bit difficult to re-wet compared to the other colors, but nowhere near as difficult to re-wet as some of the professional lines that are just PG-18. Next up we have Raw Sienna, which I do have some little splatters here. I apologize, I got them on during the swatching process. But the Raw Sienna is a really nice color. It's a nice hue, and it's a mixture of yellow ochre and raw sienna. So up here we've got all of our typical yellow ochres. We do have Da Vinci's Raw Sienna Deep, which calls itself Raw Sienna, but it's really PY42. You can see it has a very similar tone to all of these colors. And then here is a Raw Sienna from My Merry Blue. And Daniel Smith's is a bit of an outlier. It's a lot more brown than some of the other versions are. So I would definitely compare this more to a rich yellow ochre. I think it's very close to Winsor & Newton's yellow ochre or Rembrandt's. Our final stretch, we've got two more colors. Second to last, again, I've got a couple little splatters here, but it's Burnt Sienna. This is actually a really beautiful hue. It fits really nicely in next to like Da Vinci and American Journey. I think it's very, very similar. It's a little bit more orange than the Daniel Smith version, but I don't think anyone else is as earthy as the Daniel Smith version is. It does glaze really nice and cleanly here, as you can see, but again, we do have a little bit, I don't know if you can see that. It's mostly transparent here, but it gets very opaque in the second layer. And finally, we have Payne's Gray. This is a very, very textural Payne's Gray. There is an ultramarine in there, and as we saw before, their ultramarine is very, very granulating. So we've got this interesting texture here on the page. If we compare it to the others, it does fall in line with the hues of our other Payne's Grays, where it's got that blue-green undertone. And I think it's pretty comparable to the other ones. Payne's Gray varies between 2 and 3 pigments each, with Da Vinci's having the least number of pigments in it, but the other ones pretty comparable. I don't use this color very often, so I don't have a whole lot to say about it, but hopefully it's helpful for you to see it if you do use it. Alright, so I've adjusted the lights for the 4th or 5th time in this video. I'm so sorry the light keeps changing, but I want to make sure that you can see this alright, and we're going to be talking about what I've been alluding to the whole video. Now, here are our Grumbacher paints painted out on a black piece of paper. Now, I personally have never done this with watercolors before. I don't actually keep a whole lot of black paper on hand anyway. This came out of like a block of paper. It was protecting the front of it, and so I had it lying around, and when I was going through these, and so many of the colors that I was not used to having transparency issues had transparency issues, I wanted to go ahead and see what kind of fillers we were talking about in these paints. Now, I am not an expert in this. Again, like I said, I don't typically swatch out my colors like this, but because I was having so many issues with the transparency when I was doing my swatches, I did want to kind of see what types of things were in these paints. Now, typically when you swatch out a high quality watercolor paint, you're not going to get a whole lot of pigment left behind on the page, or I shouldn't say pigment. You're not going to get a whole lot of color left behind on the page because the pigments are going to pretty much subtly blend in with those backgrounds. When you have a paint that has a lot of fillers or brighteners in it, then you can get something like this happening. So here is what they look like. I'll make sure to bring it up close so you can see all these different colors. Some of them didn't have as big of an issue, like our PV19, which is good because PV19 shouldn't have a transparency issue. Our Prussian Blue didn't really have a transparency issue, but some of the other colors definitely showed up very strongly on this little sheet that we have here. To show you a comparison, I went ahead and swatched out some professional line paints, and you can barely, I'm like trying to look on my monitor to make sure you can see those, you can barely see them. You can tell that there's certainly pigment down, but it's definitely hard in comparison with these Grumbachers. To be fair, since these are not a professional quality paint, I also painted out some student grade paints, the ones that I keep in my student grade palette. And this is a combination of Van Gogh and Cotman, and you can see that there is some showing, but it's not as glaringly obvious as it is with the Grumbachers. So if you're just going for bright, beautiful paintings, this isn't going to affect your paintings all that much. In fact, it'll make them a lot brighter than they would be without them. But some people don't like additives in their paints, and I just wanted to go ahead and share that with you in case you are one of those people. If you have any experience with this or with other fillers or brighteners in your paints, go ahead and let us know in the comments below. Cricket, what was that? So as I mentioned earlier as well, I did do a practice painting with these before doing this, talking through the review and everything to see how they would handle. They were really bright, they were really fun to paint with. They do pretty much stay where you put them on the paper, and that might have to do with the paper, it might have to do with the paint. I'm not quite sure on that. I did consciously use a student grade paper or wood pulp paper for this painting because I wanted the experience to be reflective of what someone with the Grumbacher Academies might typically pair these with. So this is the B Paper Aqua B 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. With this paper, I had a fair amount of staining in that if I put something down, I couldn't really lift it up all the way. I don't know if that had to do more with the colors or more with the papers, but I did have to work around that a little bit. Let me know in the comments below what you think of Grumbacher Academy paints if you've used them before, and if you have any tips or tricks for us to use while we're getting to know them a little bit better. Overall, I did think that these were a really fun line of paint to paint with. They're really bright, really vivid. The brighteners or fillers, I don't know what the composition of their paint are, but whatever makes it be so opaque certainly could be an issue for some people, but it doesn't have to be an issue if you don't mean for it to be, and it didn't hinder me at all in this painting. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think about it. If you missed my recap at the beginning of the video, be sure to check out Instagram for a 12 days of Christmas giveaway that I am having over on Instagram. You can find me at In Liquid Color, and yeah, I will see you on Friday for our next top 5 video. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time.